Station 51, engine 27, engine 32, truck 105.
You're listening to The Fire Break with Steve Wolf. Welcome to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing some, I should say beyond developing, actually have developed now some really cool hardware for putting out wildfires, jet engines and stuff like that. Check it out on the web, teamwildfire.com. Live, coming from Chris Holloway's own mouth. Chris works at Microsoft, and Chris has got some really interesting expertise going on around the fire content. Chris, welcome to The Fire Break. How are you today? I'm good. So what are you working on these days that puts you in the fire community? How come whenever people are searching fire people, you pop up? Because people think Microsoft, they make computers. What does that have to do with fire? Screws on what? Okay, right. Right. You know, when I looked at the 16,000 homes burned down in LA, like this whole concept of zone anything made no sense because these houses are all right on top of each other. Fire trucks, you said? Okay. With water in them? Yeah, right. But I like, in all fairness, that's not what the hydrant system wasn't designed for all hydrants to be on 100% all the time. Right. It was for the occasional here and there fire, for sure. Right. Did you say before the power outage goes into effect? Okay. Okay. Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of non-electrical stuff, right? You can have a pressurized system. You can have air pressure driven hydraulic pumps. A lot of you could have you could have electric, but it's on an independent bank that you're not depleting with other assets. Yeah, no, there's so much to do. Right. Yeah. Well, you said we should think outside the box, but what about the box itself? The box we live in is usually made of fuel. You know, right? When they drive around Europe, you see all these castles. No doubt there have been hundreds of years of wildfires in the interim. They're still standing just fine because they used a more abundant building material, stone. Our whole planet's made out of it. Instead of like picking off the trees and say, let's take the most flammable part of the landscape and build our houses out of that. Right. Okay. Yeah. Nice. Right. Right. Yeah. And it's interesting you talked about landscape, Chris. Most people think firefighting is actually going to do something with the fire in the vast, number of hours related to firefighting. It has nothing to do with the fire. It has to do with landscaping. In fact, hotshot crews are basically, high-speed landscapers to manage vegetation around the fire for fuel control. They're not actually, battling the fire. They're they're starving the fire. Yeah. Right. A what screen? Liquor gauge. Okay. Yeah. It's to keep the rabbits from getting in to eat your garden. Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, and this is really why I think the move is towards community wildfire protection. There are agencies for that, but not so much agencies for individual, because individual protection doesn't work so much. Right? If I do all the mitigations and my neighbor doesn't, I'm probably still going to lose my house. It's the what? That's right. Yeah, it's going. Right, right. It's a lot, right? So, so I know you brought up the nukes, and that's pretty high tech stuff, even though it's old, right? I mean, we've had nukes since the 40s that we know of, um, but with little tweaks, it continues to be a pretty effective tool and a modern tool. But but in the fire space, like there's not a modern tool. There's the same airplane that we've been using, with minor configuration changes for the last 100 years. There's this latest in the last, half decade push towards sophisticated data gathering technology. But in my mind, gathering more data about the enemy is not a substitute for having a weapon that deals with it. And in the fire space, we seem to have like gone all in on satellite data, sensors, cameras. But where's the hardware that goes with that, so that when you spot the fire, you have a tool to do something about it? Like, where's the nuke? Yeah, this is just corollary. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm not even sure. Like, I mean, thanks to modern production now, the line is very blurred when we say this is consumer grade, you know, compared to a year ago that would have been like high pro grade. So I think in consumer electronics, the line is really blurred what's pro grade or what's consumer grade. But as to whether these devices have a role in fire, I don't know. I'd certainly rather send this mechanical perception devices to look at something than have someone hike up there. But and ditto though on the suppression side, right? I think we end up with a lot of firefighter fatalities because we send a man to do a robot's job, right? Like if you physically describe the conditions at the fire, it's 1,200 degrees. There's no breathable oxygen. There's toxic fumes in the air. If we describe these conditions to NASA, they would be talking about, well, what kind of robot should we send there? Not, how could we send a man there? Yeah, it literally is, right? Hmm. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. Maybe not as long as that lithium-ion battery, but yeah. And then whoever's around there, you're breathing whatever's burning. Yeah. How many gigabytes does it take to put out a fire? Yeah, right. Yeah, but in a war, you can call in an airstrike, or you can send a squad in, and for the most part, they have the tools to do what they're sent to do. But the fire departments and agencies, they don't have the tool that does the thing they're being sent to do. Yeah, that's right. You're right. You can keep your house from burning with your hand and hand tools, right? You can go back to medieval gardening tools, which I think are not the right tool for most firefighters, even though that's what they're given. But I think for the average homeowner, yeah, you can remove the fuels and you can do the home hardening things without so much as a phone or a computer. Maybe a good pair of work gloves. Yeah. So, but people like to play with technology, and they don't like to do things for the most part that feel like manual labor. Um, and nor do they seem to schedule someone else to do it in most cases. So we neither have the DIY model or the DFY, done for you model, working, even though the prescription is really simple. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, we saw how this played out, right? I'm going to take my chances on not getting a vaccine and hope that there's a hospital bed available with all the personnel and equipment when I need it. And then you show up, and so did 2,000 other people for this 50-bed hospital. Well, yeah, you rolled the dice the wrong way there. So, so we talk about this search for technology, Chris, right? But the answers are pretty low tech for the most part, and manual, science that you learned in fifth grade stuff, simple machines. Yeah, yeah, yes, it is. Mhm. It's iterative more than, yeah, right. Yeah, right. Or spray some potassium citrate or something. Right, there's stuff to do. Yeah, just, I don't know. There's things you don't want to talk about. There's things I don't want to talk about. But yeah, okay, but science, in all fairness, right? Science has a best answer on this uh, chemistries issue. But in order to have science weigh in on this, you have to have equal testing and published results. And once you identify chemistries that work or chemistries that are dangerous, you can't keep hiding them behind the proprietary content part of the label, where people don't know, like, does this have the good stuff in it, or does this have the bad stuff in it? And I think that most departments, then when they're adding retarding agents or suppression agents, I think it really comes down to which salesperson made the trip up the hill to talk to that department, and that's what they're using. Uh, there's really not a lot of good comparative science on what's safe and what's effective. Yeah, under what conditions though? Right, because some things are labeled biodegradable, but only while they're exposed to sunlight. And once you drop them in a pile and they're covered with other, detritus of society, they sit there forever, or worse yet, they mold rather than decompose. So they're made out of starch. Cosmodo, I like that. Yeah, yeah, right. And for how long? And after how, after, not only for how long, but as of how long? Because one of the things they found that was chemistries that were sprayed too soon lost their effectiveness before the fire got there, versus chemistries that were sprayed too long ago and leached out and were no longer present or effective. So for each chemistry, there's that timing sweet spot. Go for it. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, right. Same with landscapers, right? I talked to a landscaper in Australia, and the way he described his process with his clients, he says, "Where would you like me to place the fuels?" Yeah. Yeah. What now, this is obviously a passion for you and something that you would do, you know, even if people tried to stop you from doing it. Uh, right. So it's a personal thing. Does this manifest through at work as well? And what are the avenues there? Okay. And what a useless question, because historical averages have nothing to do with what's going on today. And it's almost that mindset of those people coming to you with that question that is largely responsible for the lack of preparation, because we're looking retroactively versus what's happening right now versus predictively what's going to happen climate wise. And it has nothing to do with what happened 10 or 20 years ago. Right. So we're constantly preparing for the last disaster. Of course. It's gonna. Yeah. Hmm. Right. Right. And what are they doing about it? We're going to have reactive, Chris, because that's human nature. So, huh? I, I guess when we look at technology, the way people use it now, or hardware, which is what used to be called technology, these are still, they're either diagnostic or reactive, right? when what's really blocking any progress in terms of cracking this nut is, you know, human nature. And so until we have a technology that will address human nature, where we're willing to predominantly be proactive rather than reactive, I think we're just chasing this uphill battle. So, but what's the technology that's going to make people proactive is the question. Not just a proactive technology like data analysis, but what would make people really say, okay, well, there's no fire outside today. I looked outside. It's actually kind of rainy. So today is not the day that I need to do my fire mitigation. And the rest of my week is really busy with other errands and stuff like that. Actually, most of this year, I've got stuff I'd rather do than mitigate my property. So at what point does this become the priority? Like today, I'm going to clear out the crap underneath my deck, or I'm going to, remove the weeds from, if not all the veg, at least the weeds from my zone 0. Like, when do people say, this is the priority for what I'm going to use my time with today versus, oh gosh, I forgot I got to order more paprika on Amazon, this and that, whatever's on the list. How do you bring this proactive measure to the top of someone's to-do list? Right. Okay, that's a financial pressure that right? If you go to buy a house and they say your loan's not going to close until these things are done. Okay, well now all of a sudden anything on that list is priority. And the same thing with a policy, right? If I get a note, hey, your policy is going to be canceled on the 27th at 12:01 a.m. unless these things are done, all of a sudden now, oh, I better get that done. Lose my policy, lose my mortgage, lose my house. So, yeah, it's not intrusive though. It's like if you want medical coverage, you got to wear your helmet when you ride your motorcycle. Right? Okay, it's a condition. You can still decide not to ride your motorcycle. You could still decide not to be insured. But you don't legally have that right on your mortgage if you want to keep your mortgage. I don't know. I thought I don't know. I was watching some TV show and they said, the definition of adulting was doing things that you didn't really want to do because they had to be done. They don't want it, no. But yeah, I mean, there's an old principle in economics, that people will act in their own best interest. But will they really? Will they if it's inconvenient? Well, Not recommended, by the way. Yeah, because if the fire doesn't get you, you're still very much vulnerable to the smoke. Yeah. This doesn't mean you can't get your own aluminum potato suit and your own Scott pack and your own whatever, right? You could do all that stuff. You could save your house. Yeah, right. I'm not sure that they would even take the liability of advising you. Yeah, right. So what do you see as a workaround for that? Well, it's if they're not talking about it at HOAs in Southern California, they're probably not talking about it anywhere. It's it's sad. Well, I want to post a picture on our website here of your reinforced lower fence section. So if you get a minute, you can text that to me. I think they're very interesting. I really appreciate your insights and your really good attitude about a really horrible problem. Yeah. Well, there's more and more opportunities to do that. You know, whether you're going to Red Sky Summit or FDIC or any number of local community level places where you can bring up the F word and you know plan something. Yeah, that's right. Oh, absolutely right. I mean, I live on a bald top. Well, not just because of my personal affiliation with that hairstyle, but a bald top mountain because I don't want to deal with flood and I don't want to deal with fire. Right? And having flown over this country many, many times, there are millions and millions of acres that are ideal for disaster avoidance. We don't have to live all on top of each other in little wooden boxes. But mhm, yeah, yep, yeah. I mean, the anal part is that you're saving your own ass, as it should be. retentive being that you've retained your ass, right? Yeah, nothing wrong with that. You only got one ass to risk, right? Yeah, yeah, right. No, yeah, yeah. No, you've woken up to the reality, right? That there's no bureaucrat sitting down at City Hall, staying up at night, wondering what am I going to do if Chris Holloway's house burns down? How am I going to get over there in time to protect him? Yeah, right. If anyone's up at night thinking about that, it's you and only you. So that's great, Chris. I really want to appreciate you joining me on the show today. Fascinating insights you offer. Okay, look, in all fairness, if you look for Chris Holloway on LinkedIn, you got to be looking for a guy in a beard, all right, uh, a beard and a lumberjack shirt. Unless he updates the picture, you're looking for a different guy than the guy you're looking at right now. Is that a fuel reduction thing? Good. Good. And yet people do. Right. Awesome. Chris, thanks for joining me. Folks, you've been listening to the wisdom and charm of Chris Holloway here. You're watching The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one. Be well.